Hi, this evening we are focusing on a young woman, Nodeep Kaur. Chances are you may have heard of her via a tweet from Meena Harris, a lawyer and niece of Kamala Harris, the US Vice President, where she said Nodeep was tortured and sexually assaulted. Or in Parliament, perhaps, when Harsimrat Badal cited Nodeep's example to bring up the treatment meted out to Dalits. Those are not the only reasons this story is important and why you need to hear about it. Let's get started. Nodeep Kaur is 23 years old. She's a Mazhabi Sikh, a community considered untouchable in Punjab. She has been in a jail in Haryana for 30 days now. Her bail plea has been rejected twice. She was arrested on the 12th of January by the Sonipat police, and she's accused of attempt to murder, extortion, rioting, and assaulting a public servant in the two FIRs filed against her. There's another FIR prior to this from December 2020, and I'm going to talk about that a little later in the video. Now, here's the police's version of what happened on 12th of January. A Sonipat police team had gone to the Kundli industrial area very close to the Singhu border to investigate manhandling of management and staff of an industrial unit. They were allegedly attacked by workers there, including Nodeep. 7 police personnel suffered injuries. Seems like a pretty straightforward story, right? Let's tell you a little bit more about Nodeep. She's a labor rights activist. Her parents are active members of a farm union. Her sister, Rajveer Kaur, is a PhD student at Delhi University's Department of Punjabi. In fact, the first person from the family to make it to the university. Now, like many others, during the lockdown, things were a little tough for this family. Money was tight. The family lived in Punjab's Sri Muktasar Sahib. Nodeep's father was fired from the factory he worked at, so Nodeep came to Delhi in search of work around 4 months ago. She started working at a factory in Kundli where an all too familiar story began in a sense. So, harassment, especially of women workers, unpaid wages, subpar working conditions. That's when about 300 workers decided to unionize and join the Mazdoor Adhikar Sangathan, or the MAS. Nodeep was one of them. On the 2nd of December, the MAS carried out a protest march of 2,000 workers from across Delhi in solidarity with the farmers' protest. Many of them, including Nodeep, were fired from their factories where they worked when this news reached the owners. Since the 6th of December, the MAS tent has been standing tall among thousands of makeshift tents at Delhi's borders in support of the farmers. It has also been mobilizing for its own cause, so it's been calling workers who have grievances against their factory management and recording their testimonies. Over the weeks, all of this gained momentum until on the 28th of December, when there was a tussle at an industrial unit very close to the Singhu border. This was between protesting workers and what are called industrial safety personnel. Essentially, a group of private security personnel. They are armed. They were hired by the Kundli Industrial Association to ostensibly protect the factories from being robbed or damaged. Now, the workers are alleging that the events of December 28th were not a tussle. The workers were beaten up by this industrial safety personnel who even opened fire. But it is some of the workers who were booked for extortion and other charges. One of them was Nodeep. So that's the third FIR I was talking about. But remember, she wasn't arrested for it. The arrest happened only on Jan 12th after the latest scuffle. Nodeep's sister says that on Jan 12th, when she was arrested from Kundli close to the Singhu border, there were no female police persons. The same day, Shiv Kumar, who's the president of the Mazdoor Adhikar Sangathan, was also arrested. He's also in Karnal jail without bail. Now, the Haryana police is facing allegations of beating up this young woman, wounds on her private parts, tearing her clothes, custodial violence, and sexual violence in custody. Nodeep's sister has used some of these words interchangeably and then denied them later in various media reports, but that doesn't take away from the fact that Nodeep was allegedly beaten up brutally while being arrested or after that and has possibly faced injuries on her private parts. The Haryana police says these allegations are all arbitrary. They in fact keep citing that she was taken to the civil hospital and that they have a written statement from Nodeep where she says she didn't want to be examined for sexual assault because she wasn't assaulted. To be honest, that's extremely odd. Now, in the absence of a medical report, it is extremely tough to verify some of this. Nodeep's lawyer filed for a medical report on the 15th of January after Nodeep's fellow inmates actually sent a message to the family that she was bleeding heavily from her legs and could barely walk. A medical examination did finally take place on the 25th of January, 2 weeks after this alleged custodial violence. This final report is yet to be given to Nodeep's lawyer and the family. There is another aspect I want to hint at. Nodeep's case needs to be spoken about and headlined and screamed about. It is the story of a Dalit woman who is fighting for her rights and that of her fellow workers. It is also the story of labor rights in this country and the routine harassment of workers from their management. It is also a story of alleged custodial violence. It's possibly also the story of how Dalits and Muslims face brute force and disproportionate violence that has become so normalized in our discourse. It may also be the story of dismantling the unity between workers and farmers at the Singhu border. It may not entirely be the story of a Dalit woman who was arrested from Singhu border for simply supporting the farmers, as some of the tweets and headlines have framed this as. Now, some of you may argue this is not needed, this nuance, this differentiation is unnecessary, or that I'm hedging. I'm only arguing we're not. The violence is contemptible, even if it doesn't entirely fit the hashtag of the farmers' protests. This is Newsworthy. My name is Anubha Bhonsle. I hope this was worthy of your time. From my entire team, thank you for listening.